services-based world. Many of us have grown up in a product-based world. First it was platforms, as we heard yesterday. Then it became client-server applications. Then all of us moved to ERP. Our life revolved around ERPs. Right? And now all of that is suddenly becoming redundant. It's becoming more granular, and every organization is moving to a services world where people are consuming services. And I've just listed a few over there. I mean, there are application services, there are data services, there are infrastructure services, and it really gives you an opportunity to pick and choose what you want. But it is also a challenge. The challenge is that the traditional auditing techniques for a product world, how you audit an ERP, is not going to work in this model. Yesterday you heard about API-based architecture, right, where you consume APIs and you consume services. And you really spin up quick consumption applications depending on when you need it. So that approach will not work. So it needs different skills, it needs new skills, it needs a new approach, it needs a new methodology. And the opportunity is that if we pitch in right now and engage with business, and we have an opportunity to influence how the organizational decision making happens and the controls that are put in place. And there are many, many examples here. I mean, authentication is a great example. I mean, how do you authenticate users in a cloud-hosted application, right? I mean, do you use, you have seen applications where they say sign up using your Google ID, right? You can do it by signing up with your organizational ID, at Deloitte.com or at Pricewaterhouse.com, can be done. But then there are other issues. So services, move to services is a huge shift. The third dimension is simplicity. A cloud-based world is a very, very simple world. It's very simple to build. It is very simple to manage. But does it mean it is all that simple? Right? I mean, it's a counterintuitive question, but so what the cloud world does is that it hides all the complexity behind layers of abstraction, right? So as on the UI, on the user experience, on the UI side, what you see on the screen, how you do it, I mean, it's very simple. But there are elements of complexity. And typically it's in the way it is architected, your solution is architected, it is designed, how your data is managed, how do you plan storage, how do you plan movement of data. And again, as IT auditors, the opportunity is that how do we get into these layers, well below what is apparently simple, and find out what the risks are and find out how we mitigate them, right from the design stage. Because when an application is, your organization has developed an application and it's live on the cloud, by then it's already too late, right? Because it's not a traditional in-premise application. On the cloud means it's already exposed to malicious insiders, ex-employees who are not happy with the organization, hackers who want to profit from it, and anybody with a general malicious intent, right? So in a cloud world, you have to get it right before it goes live. Right? And so therefore, the lesson is not to be swayed by the simplicity that's apparent on the surface, but go 2-3 levels deeper. What about the risks? Do the risks change? I would say that the risks change in scale, but the risks very much remain the same. You still have the same risks of authentication. I mean, that's to me the single biggest one. And how do you manage authentication in a way that is manageable and it is secure? Do you use a cloud hosted identity store? Do you use an in-premise identity store? Cloud gives you an opportunity to really extend your ecosystem. You can have your vendors signing on to your system using their user ID and password. right? It's something called federation. It's not difficult to do. It's very, very handy. It's very useful because if that employee leaves that vendor organization or service provider organization, they deprovision and it automatically gets revoked. But then, right, but the risk of authentication remains the same. And each alternative solution has its own benefits and challenges. So authentication, encryption. How do you encrypt in the cloud? How do you do key rotation? How do you do key management? And for sure you have to manage encryption. Except for SaaS, in most scenarios you have to manage encryption. So how do you do it? How do you manage malware? How do you do monitoring? Does your security event management tools work in the cloud? How do you manage that? How do you address code level vulnerabilities? So the risks remain the same. The weakest link in the chain can still trip your whole security architecture apart. But in a cloud world, the scale is much bigger because here the weakest link in the chain may be your vendor, one of your employees, something in your customer space, one of your service providers, maybe your web hoster, could be anybody, right? And that makes life that much more difficult. So if you are doing the traditional systems audit that we have always done, it had a very nice scope section in it, right? How do you scope something like this, right? Because once something has gone wrong, how do you face the CEO and tell him that it was not in my scope, right? You may not even have defined it, right? And anyway, you are accountable for the outcome. So how do you do that? So the risks remain the same, but it needs a different approach. It needs a different mindset. It needs a different way of addressing it. What are the opportunities for us in the IT audit community? I mean, I see nothing but opportunities. I mean, I really had to do a little bit of struggle to come up with the risks. I mean, I see opportunities everywhere. I think the biggest opportunity is to really evolve cloud audit as a service. Now, it's true for organizations like large multi-locational organizations like Indian IT companies, large multinational, multi-location organizations like us, and also services firms and IT audit firms and practitioners, right? I mean, because for the first time you are really, really geography neutral. I mean, you can do cloud audit for your clients, cloud solution pretty much from anywhere. Today with Skype and video conferencing and all of that, I mean, it's communication is easy and you don't really need to visit his data center anymore. Right? It needs innovative cloud consulting models. It needs innovative audit models. It needs a stronger partnership with your customer or with your organization. But it can be done. I think the opportunity is huge. And our lower cost obviously plays a big part in it. Now, again, as I think back, what do we really need to take advantage of this opportunity? I see three main areas to work on: the skill, the approach, and the tools. Out of these three, to me, the biggest area to address is the skill area. And because the traditional skills that made us successful so long and helped us manage through at least two levels of technology transitions, to client server, to web applications, ERPs, will no longer work here. We need completely different set of skills. Right? We need familiarity with cloud solutions, multi-vendor cloud environments. So if your customer is on Amazon, you need to know how Amazon allows, let's say, a VPN from your organization to your VM, or encryption, or Microsoft, or any product for that matter. So you need familiarity across product suites, solution suites. You need to be familiar with cloud mobility scenarios, which are very, very different from the regular stuff, right? I mean, if your customer has developed a mobile application and that mobile application wants to access an in-premise data store, it's a scenario of today, and the tools and techniques of yesterday will not give you the solution. Right? So it needs significant amount of investment in retraining ourselves. Approach, we have to move away from a checklist controls approach to a threat-based approach. And last but not the least, the only way to, in my experience and our experience, the only way to secure the cloud, and there is a detailed session coming after this, is to intervene at the design stage. You have to get design right, because after that it's already too late. And last but not the least, as auditors, we need to be comfortable with modern tools, right? Both IDEs as well as design tools. The old CAT tools don't work at cloud scale, so we need to be comfortable with modern BI analytics visualization tools. There's no way you can identify outliers using traditional tools. And all of these need to come together, and they can come together. And I think there's the impact that the cloud is having on organizations is huge. It is transformational, but it also represents a whole generation of opportunities for us to take advantage of for the next 5 to 10 years. I think I'm on time, so with that I'll pause for questions. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that have a right design.
Yeah. Means that, suppose you're building an application, right? So historically, audits have happened after the application is live, so it's a post-implementation scenario, or sometimes 2 days before that, right? Getting the design right is to do a test of design when the architect is drawing up the architecture of that application, before a single line of code has been written, probably, right? Where you can sit with the architect and the architecture and say that, authentication does not look right, it needs a different approach. The data stores are not designed correctly, it needs a different approach. You have not considered encryption.
Yeah, but almost every time, everything will be ready. You are just hiring their services. At that point, how you can raise the questions of the design?
So, good question, but that is true only in the SaaS scenario. In IaaS and PaaS, your application and data you still have to design, right? So if you are hosting, let's say, your company portal on, as a PaaS, or your, some sales application as PaaS, right? You still have to design the application, you still have to code it, you still have to build it, and then you put it to production. In a traditional scenario, it would have been in premise. Here it would have to be on the cloud, but that you still have to do.